everybody to tonight's talk. It's a panel discussion actually with all of these beautiful people. But before we start, we're going to have a welcome to country from Auntie Thelma.
Jinawada with a bayan to each and every one of you, and thank you for coming along to such an auspicious evening here at the Art Gallery in Lismore, the Regional Art Gallery in Lismore. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces, old faces and new faces, which is always a way of letting anything grow and stretch and new energy comes in. And if you want to be on the film later, go out there and trespass and see if you can get tackled, you know. I tried to get across the paddock there, you know, where I was going. You lost? I said, yeah, I was supposed to be going here tonight. So they're out there watching every move that people make. And no filming it, please. Jenny will tell you all about that, I believe. She got sprung from up in the window there, trying to take some film.
Thanks, Thelma.
Yes, my turn. Anyway, welcome to our elders here, elders past, present, future generations that have come through, and to all you elders that are here in the room this evening. It's nice to be able to get out now that we've got that bit of freedom from COVID, and to be able to use brains again. I forgot how to use mine when I've been out doing a little bit of speaking lately, and I was saying to whoever was beside me, what was that word? I forgot that word. Because I haven't used the brains enough through COVID. Too many jigsaw puzzles, too much sewing and a lot of gardening. But that makes you feel healthy, happy, wealthy and wise. So today, or this evening, we're going to talk about rivers. And thanks to Kylie, I'm going to dob you into, you know, only a last 5-minute notice, but one thing I do know is a story about the Richmond River. As I grew up over North Lismore, we swam in the river. That was our social place. Across the river when in summertime, when we could get grapes hanging over the back fence, and nobody seemed to mind. Mind you, they couldn't catch us. We lived there, and then we had the story of Hector the crocodile, who the crocodile was supposed to be at a circus or a show, I suppose, if it depends on which country you're in, and started to grow too big, so they put it out near our river, and many times people saw it bathing in the sunlight, and we all reckon as children that it nibbled our leg. I'm sure it did. Could have been old Mr. Ross, who knows. Anyway, so the river was such an important place for us. We grew up there. We had it supplied fish for us, and it was really healthy at one time. Lismore didn't start here. Lismore started down at Whyalla Road. Whyalla? Anyway, there's 2 places down there. And the ships had to come up here to turn around. So that's how Lismore became about. And, because, hey? It did, at the 2 bridges, roundabout, yes, it did. And I always used to think that that writing there was submarine cable, but it's submerged cable. So it took me a while to work that one out. There was only certain parts of the river where we swam. There was other places where it was culturally insignificant to swim, which were dangerous places. And as you cross the bridge over to North Lismore via the top here, we've had many incident there where young men have fallen into the river and drowned. So we knew where we could swim and where we couldn't swim, and paid respect to it. We didn't, it was so clean and beautiful, we used to drink the water, so we never carried a water bottle around with us. We would not even take a picnic bag down for lunchtime. We'd go after lunch and we'd nibble all the way down to the river and we'd nibble all the way home. Don't ask me what I was nibbling, but we could get the gum off the trees for chewing gum, and certain plants we would have, and everybody did it. The Aboriginal kids, non-Aboriginal kids, and we just went there, and we'd, that was our social life down at the river, and on special occasions we'd all go over to North Lismore railway station, catch the train and spend the day down at Byron Bay or Brunswick's Heads. So that was our beach trip away. But it was very healthy and clean until the boats then emptied their ballasters, to which left in lots of the waters from all overseas, and that they would drop out, and of course that started to help to destroy our river. While I was in class one day, I remembered, and I was talking to my little mates, and we were about, Lismore City Council was, another one topic, was talking about, we used to collect your batteries and take it to the recycling centre. And I said, well, in our days, we used to just take it over to the dump. And there was a dump opposite Albert Park, and we know what a beautiful Albert Park is now. And there was a mitten there outside, just when you go to Albert Park, straight down there, it was a big mitten. And a few years ago now, a tree fell in and you could see all the pippies at the roots. So the tree got pulled back up, and hopefully nobody, knew exactly where it was. And then the other one was up at Robert White Bridge, up the other end of North Lismore. And there was a dump site there. And I said, that's probably why half our river died too, because all the runoff from the dump sites went into our river, drained into our river. So what we do today or in the future, it affects the future of our children. So always take care of what you do. It's like throwing the plastics down. It ends up in the river, it ends up into our sea animals, whatsoever. But the Richmond River was so rich in food. And Lismore here, which was called Dungarimba, was a place of Eden to where we're on swamp ground here, and you can smell it when the rain's around. But it was so abundant in food, fresh water, fruit, animals. So people had a healthy lifestyle, and they weren't nomadic. They just went off to the beach when summer came, or to visit the families at other occasions. So Aboriginal people paid respect to the river, didn't take or put anything into it. And I think, just looking at way back then, they've got garbage bins now, 3 of them, they're always full up to put it, send out to the tip. All we had was one tin bin about that size, you remember those? And only bottles ever went in there. The cans would be crushed up, the scraps would be put down the back for the animals to eat, the paper would be in the fire to burn, to start the fire up and that. So we didn't have waste like we have waste now. Biscuits came in, broken biscuits, you could go and get 6pence worth, and they came in brown paper bags, put in. The eggs were wrapped up in 3, 6. Good art in doing that without breaking any eggs on the way home. But we learned to do things in a way that was sustainable for all of us. But we did destroy it. And about 8 or 10 years ago, Rouse Water County decided that we need to do something about our rivers. So they had a big program on, and the people out at, which was only June and only Irene, they helped put a big book out for Beck's Hill. They took about 2 years. Beck's Hill somebody else did one, Cooper's Creek did a book, and they came to us North Lismore people late at the end of the day, which we took 3 months to do it, but we had so many stories and it was a nice exercise. But it was to get us to look at our river again, to get us to see and show us what are we doing. We're destroying our future, we're destroying our river, and how can we make it clean and healthy? And then along came a lot of land cares, and they've done a marvellous job. And they're fun days, so if you've got nothing else to do and you want to join up in land care, you can sit there like me and just tell stories. You don't have to dig the garden. You can let these young ones do dig the holes, and the stories that everybody still has that's connected to the river, connected to a big flood. And Aboriginal people would think, and Judith Light used to always say, I've never known, Unfay. She was always, when the flood comes, it would bring the fish up. And had that positive thing about the flood. And so we see things in different light, Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people. So the floods brought up the fish, plenty of fish came up the river then, and things like that. And it was also a great social life with being, in the flooded areas. But it also would help clean out, flush out the rivers and that. And it's really always man's undoing that's created the pollution type things. So if we could look at those side of things in life and say, well, what's happened here? Let's see if we can change it, or see if we can do something a little bit better to make it. I'd like to acknowledge our people here on the Bundjalung country, this beautiful land that we call home, and to ask our ancestors to show us the way. I still talk to my grandparents and family when I go anywhere and when I go onto new country and that. Tell them who you are and that you've come with great respect and that you would like to look after their country, and if you don't know how to, ask them how could you do it. I get little ones, and I did a group, 26 women last Saturday in the rain, teaching about, and I thought they assume, teachers should not assume, should they, Jenny? No, that they would know how to plant the plant. Don't plant some of them upside down. They certainly are a beginner's lot. So we had a wonderful time and got to doing that, and we've got 6 more weeks to go to learn all about how to grow plants and that. But I always say all of us should go and plant a prickly bush, whether it be a rose thorn, I'm not saying it should be a finger lime, anything with prickles to give our home a home for our little birds, so that the big bossy ones don't come in and chase them away. Now, one other thing, the hill up the top at the back here, that we just call the Bagan Hill, and you give me a wink for a timer, is the sleeping lizard. And after the Second World War, when servicemen came back, they were told they could have selection as long as you went and cleared the land of flora and fauna. So that hill, after having all that beautiful rain, tropical rainforest and that, was cleared bare, and all the plants were taken away. And so all the top soil was washed into the river there. And we don't have very thick, good soil. So that all got washed into our Richmond River. Now, the name of those river, and one was called Leicester Creek, and one was called Wilson Creek. And they both came into Richmond River. But in '67, somebody decided they're going to call it Wilson River. And no, still Richmond River to me. So Casino has Upper Richmond River, and Lismore has Richmond River. And that's why you'll see the names of the schools and everything else around here attached with Richmond River. So things change, and I think it's always good to know where things started. Because if we keep changing to suit our self or our needs, we're losing our identity. And if we keep messing up with nature, we're losing our world. Our young people are great, they're getting into the dirt, getting their hands dirty, and have quite a bit to say about with the coal seam and all that, which is wonderful. But I'm sure you'll have a lovely evening here this evening, make new friends, it's always good. It's always good when Lismore gets promoted and is on the map. Sometimes I think they forget about us, but it's lovely. So welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you. Welcome from our ancestors, and that when you travel, please travel home safely. Thank you.
Kylie and I are going to share this microphone. So my name is Claudie, and I'm the Community Engagement Officer here at Lismore Regional Gallery. And tonight we have a very special visitor, but we also have some very special guests that I want to tell you about. And they are the Wake Up Time women from Casino. And Kylie, and Auntie Margaret couldn't be here tonight, but we're thinking of her. And we're really excited that they're going to be part of the selection of the Biennale of Sydney, the 23rd Biennale of Sydney. It's a really wonderful inclusion, and we have José Roca here, who is the Artistic Director of the Biennale of Sydney. He's come to visit us through Ekins today. We're glad you made it. We also have Vanessa Ekins, who is our lovely mayor here tonight. We're actually going to start this evening with José talking a bit about his practice as a curator and also the program and the inclusion of the Wake Up Time Women for the Biennale of Sydney. So he's going to show us some images, and then we're going to open the discussion up to the other people on the panel and talk a bit more, drill down a bit more into their connections to the river. And I just want to say I have a really strong connection to the river in Lismore because my sister and I live right on Leicester Creek, and sometimes our house is actually in the river. So we have experienced that. Sometimes this gallery is also part of the river. The amazing thing of Lismore being a floodplain is that the river goes where the river wants to. Yeah. So José, let's start with you, and I think Sarah's going to be. Oh, you've got the. Yeah, switch on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Auntie, for being here. I'm gonna briefly talk about my work as a curator, so you know where I come from and what my previous interests have been. I started many years ago as a curator, first locally in Colombia, then working internationally, particularly in Latin America, but also in the United States and Europe. Looking back at my practice as a curator, there are two things that have always been there. One is an interest for place, and the other is an interest for community or working collectively. I was part of the curatorial team of the Sao Paulo Biennale, one of the oldest in the world. The theme was how to live together, como viver junto. So we were 6 curators and we were each one taking on one of the themes, and I took the responsibility of organizing the residencies of the artists that were going to go to the Amazon jungle, a place in the Brazilian Amazon jungle called Acre, or Acre, which was formerly Bolivian land and was seized by the rubber tappers at the height of the rubber boom in the 19th century, and was briefly, only for 3 years, an independent republic based on extraction of latex from the trees. So it was a very interesting post-colonial history. So I went there and organized the residencies of many artists. I also came across this self-taught former rubber tapper, Elio Melo, that did these incredible works about the jungle. This is a tree that is also a map of the jungle. Each little branch is a tree that he had to milk, to harvest every day in his journey through the jungle. So I organized a small retrospective of his work. So yeah, you see, he created this sort of surreal world of trees that were like cows because they had to be milked. And then one artist from Colombia took on the history of this place, and instead of tapping the tree, he began covering it with latex, creating a cast of the tree that was then shown horizontally, bringing to the fore the creation history of the Amazon jungle, which was that primal tree that was felled and created the river. And also Marjeti Kapotric, an artist from Slovenia, that created a manifesto for the peoples of the jungle. In Portuguese, jungle is, the word for jungle is floresta. So they say, the people that live in Acre, we don't live in the city, therefore we cannot be citizens. We are florestanos, we are jungles and denizens of the jungle. So they created this Florestania, the citizenship of the jungle, and it's a beautiful concept to think yourself through your own, parameters and not be defined by the other. It's a little unresponsive. Oh. Okay, this is also a project that I coordinated for some years, where we brought a group of 8 artists to different places. This is the Sacred Valley in Peru, near Machu Picchu in Ollantaytambo. We also went to Oaxaca in Mexico, to the Galapagos Islands. I don't know why it does that. Okay. And we had an experience of plays as a collective, curators, artists, producers, and then we had an exhibition as a result. Okay. And this is Flora, a place that we founded with my wife Adriana, and that we've been running for 10 years. It's a place for art and nature in Bogota that started as a residency place that showed the results of residencies in a city. Okay, this is going to be performative. I didn't expect that it's going to be fun. So we have a residency place on the Magdalena River in Colombia, a very important town during colonial times, because it was the segue between, the colonial enterprise came to the Caribbean, to Cartagena, and then upstream through the river, and then here in Honda. So we have a residency place there, and the artists went there for, well, let's just run through it. It's really doing its thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, sure. So artists produce pieces in relation to their experience of the river. This is Doris Sanchez, a very well-known Colombian artist that did a project that was not directly related to her experience of the river, but to her experience of nature. Or we also presented work by people that wouldn't define themselves as artists. This is someone from Medellin that has been doing for 7 years research in the Amazon about the dyes and the pigments that are used by the people in the Amazon. So it's really a project about preserving cultural knowledge. That's a piece by Colombian artist Miguel Ángel Rojas. It's a long story, but to make it short, was part of an installation about how the landscape in Colombia has been raised down to plant coca, and also raised down because of the chemicals that are sprayed to eradicate the illicit crops. So it's a long story, but to make it short, this is a signifier of a larger installation that took place in the National Museum of the National University in Bogota, regarding the trade in coca and the effects it has in the territory. So this was about the natural pigments in the Amazon. I'll sort of go faster. And this is Flora, the place that we run with Adriana. So it's in a working class neighborhood, and in Colombia, at least, I don't know here, there is a correlation between the economic possibilities of a given neighborhood and the amount of trees. In lower income neighborhoods, there are no trees. So we decided we would do something to remediate this. So this is the building where we are. We have residencies for artists there, and we created a rooftop garden that was meant to be, an example for all the neighbors to follow. So we did workshops about permaculture and urban planting and so on and so forth. And that were Kids, Cats and One Dog is by an artist from Iran that references the floods in New Orleans. Anyways, this is Flora, this is the work that we do. We first planted grass and then little by little let it grow like a wild garden. And then we created a project with an artist that was to be like these columns that were placed randomly, resembling the way trees are in the forest. And then it was supposed to be, okay, or it is supposed to be the place where huge branches will fall, creating a canopy like you do in the forest. So that's the garden. It's been growing. We don't know how it is because we came to Australia in December, so it's kept growing. When we go back to Bogota, probably there will be more produce. So that's Flora. This is Water Weavers, an exhibition that I did in New York some years ago that dealt with rivers and weaving in Colombia, and which was the sort of the impetus for the project that I pitched to the Biennale of Sydney, a project about rivers. So in this case, we did a publication where each chapter was one of the important rivers in Colombia: Amazonas, Magdalena, Caquetá, Cauca, etc. And it was a book that included historic and contemporary texts about the rivers in our country. So it was a very beautifully installed, atmospheric exhibition that included art, but also design, furniture design, textile design, graphic design, and that through a curatorial strategy that I turned figure ground, created immersive installations where the public was encouraged to have an experience. So the Biennale. The original idea that I had about rivers sort of morphed into this project that I'm going to talk about briefly, which is called Rivers. It's the Latin root for a brook or a stream, and that Latin root gave birth to another term, rivalis, which is the root for rivalry. But originally, rivalis was the term for those who shared the water from a river or a stream. Then it came to mean those who shared the same lover, and hence this opposition that is now at the core of the idea of rivalry. So we thought that this idea of river the river as a place of contestation was an interesting thing. So the core of the show is the idea of water and conflict, so the geopolitics of landscape, but then it branches out in many other themes, like, for example, rights of nature. In recent years, many rivers and other waterways have attained legal personhood, so they can be represented in court. So they can also be represented in an exhibition, for example. There are, of course, stories of creation from different communities, and then alternative knowledge systems. So this diagram shows that even though the river can be the source of the main idea, it can branch out in many other possibilities, and the Biennale will be this part here, as opposed to being a Biennale about the river. We haven't decided of the sites, but we will try to do the exhibition alongside the Parramatta River and into the Sydney Harbour. And then some issues that I just want to mention. I decided to move to Sydney for the entire process as a gesture of commitment, but also because I wanted to be working as a local, so as to be able to immerse myself in the local community as much as one can. And that is why I've been sort of traveling first in Sydney and now throughout Australia to try to meet, to understand this wonderful, beautiful country. I put together a team of curators from all associated with local institutions in Sydney. We have curatorial advisors, so that since we cannot travel, but somebody has done that travel for us and has pointed us to interesting practices. So that is also a way of being global while being local. Also, I think that curatorial practice is a long-term conversation. So I have been traveling for many years worldwide. So why not bring those conversations to the table? Those travels have already been done, because one of the ideas is also that we should build upon what's already there, not try to invent the wheel. And so oftentimes biennials, biennial directors are supposed to bring on like the new idea, and this is completely different from what came before, but I'm completely opposed to that kind of thinking. So the idea of, for example, looking at practices that are already in the making and trying to be the catalyzer for those practices, as opposed to just choosing a very good artist and then asking them to produce a new piece in relation to the theme that you are proposing. The idea of continuity, and then working with other people around, other institutions around Australia. And the idea of participants as opposed to artists, because besides artists we will have architects, designers, activists, and also people from the communities. So we will be also inviting several bodies of water as participants in the Biennale. We are now looking at ways for them to have their voice. So that's going to be tricky, how to have them without having someone speak on their behalf, but I think it can be done. And people from communities, so I'll just go through this. I'll just end here so that we can continue. So just to say that we are going to keep an eye on the carbon footprint of this Biennale, trying to have a calculation for the public to know how much does an event of this scope mean for the environment. So it's not going to be carbon neutral, but we are going to communicate its carbon footprint in the label. So we will, this is an exhibition that we did some years ago, where you, as a viewer, could have a calculation of how did it cost the environment by doing it locally, and if we had shipped it from its place of origin. I think we can leave it there.
Beautiful to think about the bodies of water being participants. I think that's very compelling. So I thought I might start with Kylie Caldwell. She's a Bundjalung weaving artist and fibre and textile artist and visual artist. She's also the Arts Northern Rivers Indigenous Officer. She's a Bundjalung woman, and she's part of the Casino Wake Up Time Women Group too, who will be part of the Biennale this year. So I'm going to refer to my notes, just so you know. So one of the things we talked about the other day when you and Vanessa came and we had a bit of a chat, we were talking about Indigenous cultural and environmental knowledge regarding natural resources. So one of the things you talked about was some of the issues for the harvesting of some of the fibres that you use with the weaving. So we were thinking about including the availability or the sustainability of harvest and seasonal quality of grass species. What are some of the issues that present now in this modern time with some of those natural species that you work with, and how is it for you as somebody sort of rediscovering, reclaiming some of that cultural knowledge in that area?
Thanks, Claudie. I'd just like to also acknowledge that I'm on Widgeable Wibble land, and I want to pay respect to my elders, past, present, and in the future, and thank Auntie Thelma for that beautiful welcome to country and sharing the stories of rivers, the Richmond River and Lismore. Thank you very much, Aunt. So in regards to, I guess, the biggest challenges, there are a number of different challenges for us in working with our local native plants. For instance, one is that we've just started to use bucky brush, which is a soft twig brush that likes moist, wet, sandy soils in heathlands and swamps. It's a home for nesting birds and frogs and a food source for caterpillars. It's our most preferred natural fibre to use because it's almost like it's designed for us to weave with. It's a fibre that has got a nice pointy end, a fibre that we just pick and we don't have to strip. With some of the other fibres, we have to do much more work with it. Our process of harvesting is that usually we spend a day collecting, and then we, pre-wash, and usually with the bucky rush, because it grows in moist, wet conditions, it's quite hydrated, so we have to wait for a couple of weeks for it to fully dry out, and then we'll rehydrate it when we're going to use it again. What we like about it is that when we pick, we can keep it for a year, like we can keep it in stock and don't have to go back. So one of the challenges for us is the accessibility of bucky rush, that our wetlands have been built up upon due to progress and development in the local area. So we have to, drive, 30 minutes to an hour to get this plant to use it. The availability of it, like, it's limited there, and there are only a few spots that we've found. And we find like the most spots that we're accessing at the moment is along roadsides. We feel a bit awkward, like we're in these bushes with our bums out, hitting these grasses, and cars are driving past, and we're like, who's that? One spot we have to go to is that there's a fence there, and I struggle to get over that fence. And I'm the youngest of the group, so I really feel for the ladies. But we only pick, we try to pick 3 times a year, 2 to 3 times a year, so we're not there all the time. And we're also conscious of another challenge is that the vulnerability of this ecosystem that we're accessing. We're really trying not to damage it in any way while we're there, because we know that there's only a limited number of spots that we can pick from it, and we want to preserve it and not damage, cause any damage to the spot. And also, I think in the Northern Rivers region, our wetlands are really in poor conditions across the region, and there's not enough done around the restoration and regenerations of our wetlands. And much of that is from catchment and habitat disturbance caused by land use, vegetation clearing. Feral animals are an issue for us. Recreational facilities close to wetlands or in the vicinity also cause some issues for them. And I guess a significant issue, as a way for us to kind of work with our current issues, is that we've started using lamandra, another local fibre that our ancestors have used. And what we love about this fibre, and the council loves about this plant, because they've planted it everywhere, it's quite abundant. And so it grows in most towns. roundabouts, they love it. We've got quite a nice picking spot out near a roundabout that it grows so beautifully, and it's my favourite spot. Thank you, council. So we've started to kind of prolong, or not to use much of the bucky rush, because usually in our traditional basket they would have been made from one fibre and not two. So we've been using the lamanga for the core of the basket, and we use the bucky rush as well to kind of extend or get more use out of the bucky rush, because we love to work with it so much. And then I guess for another biggest challenge for us in working with natural fibres has been the cultural knowledge transference, which has been prohibited during colonisation in Australia. I think that's been one of our biggest barriers. Our weaving practice has been a process of revival and reclamation. Much of our work that we've done is based on treading back together our knowledge and practice, our learning from our elders, stories and memories, archival baskets in museums and collections, which unfortunately in most collections across museums, much of the collections were based on male collections, and often, there was very limited collections of that. So, you go to a museum and you see, 20 boomerangs or, 50 shields, and then, you go and there may be one or two baskets of women's stuff. So it's, having access or, stored knowledge on that, there's not much of it. Settlers' recorded stories have helped in gaining back that knowledge. Fellow sister non-Indigenous weavers have helped and reconnected us and shared some of the knowledge they have around cordage and basketry as well. It has been part of that process for us. Trial and error, ongoing practice, sharing, seeking, refining, connecting back to country, connecting back to some of those spots where our ancestors would have walked, is quite special for us, and we love those days out on country. And ongoing at weaving with each other and with other groups in the community as well. I kind of feel like the halting of cultural transference of knowledge and practice is not acknowledged fully in Australia. I feel personally that cultural reclamation and revival journey is undervalued, under-resourced and limited to the capacity of those involved. We are losing our elders and our knowledge holders. How do we ensure cultural knowledge and practice is respectfully continued? And if we are to, how do we continue to learn from it as well? So for weaving for us has established a tangible connection to our culture, land and our waterways, and a way to start a process of knowledge transference again with women's practice. We've been doing this, we've been at this journey for about 8 to 9 years now, and still feel like we don't know much. We still have lots to learn, and that we acknowledge that we are learning from this process as well.
It's interesting in the part 2 where you talked about the caring for waterways and caring for the wetlands, and I think that's a nice moment to talk to you, Vanessa Ekins, our lovely mayor, who has been part of the Wilson River Land Care Group since 1999. She's been a Lismore councillor since 2004 and also a delegate on the Rouse Water board. So big connections to water for you and the waterways. And maybe you could talk to us a bit about the Wilson River Land Care Group and some of the things that you're planting there and the reasons why you're planting those specific plants and what your connection is to the river.
Okay, Thank you, Claudie. Yeah, the river's really the centre of Lismore, and yeah, it's a really important place to me. I'm wearing my river colours this evening. The river shouldn't be this colour. As Auntie Thelma said earlier on, when the cedar cutters first came here, the river was clear to the bottom, and the trees were so big that the canopy met and you couldn't see the sky from the river. And so what this represents is 170 years of very poor farming practice, and this is soil. It is soil from our farms that is washing down to Ballina. And if you go down to see the fabulous exhibition on it in Ballina, you must go and see that. You'll see representations of soil samples presented as art, and they're this colour. So one of the things I'm really interested in is planting the riverbanks and putting vegetation back there, and that's where Landcare comes in, particularly Wilson's River Landcare, which she started in 1993, was it? One of the original members is sitting right here in the audience. Yay, Laurie. And so we have a proud history in Wilson's River Landcare, and what we plant is lamandra. Lismore loves lamandra because it's got a very fibrous penetrating root system, and it's excellent at holding riverbanks together. And we plant species that we learnt exist, that we know existed when the cedar cutters first came up the river, and they're also species that could withstand days and days of inundation when it floods, because we live in a floodplain. So they're simple things that are useful for weaving, like lamandra, the brown couragon, which you make string from, and oh, my mind's gone blank, but there's probably, Kylie could probably rattle off all the species that you could use there. And that was, what was that? Did someone have a suggestion?
Native hibiscus.
Oh, the native, oh, I don't know if we don't plant that. Why don't we plant that? It's probably it's coastal. So that was a great process for us to go through to identify the species that we planted. And I became very interested in what the plants were and how they were used. And a lot of them were food-based, and a lot of them were used for weaving fish nets and baskets and other things. And so I became really interested in the weaving side of things as well, to learn how do we harvest this stuff that we've been growing, how do you store it, how do you prepare it for use. Yeah, there's so many things you can do with plants, not just eat them or just enjoy sitting on the riverbank. And Auntie Thelma said that too. It's one of the beauties of land care, is that we're creating a space on the river that's really good just to gather and be and enjoy that space. We don't always go down there with our mattocks and slog it out amongst the weeds. We sometimes just go down there and enjoy the space. And that's something that the Widgeable Wild people have been doing here for thousands of years, is gathering in those on the riverbanks for teaching and learning.
And in that time of working with Landcare, have you seen a change in that space, in that ecosystem? What kinds of changes have you seen, both positive and things that you think could be done better?
Well, we've created jungle in the CBD. You can see our sites just down Molesworth Street. It's very jungly. We've actually also created human habitat, because people camp there, which they have for thousands of years. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. I can't think of anything bad associated with planting trees or negatives, really. It's an interesting... planting trees solves all problems. Every single problem you can mention, planting trees sorts it. You feel better when you've got your fingers in the soil. You're creating habitat. We're talking about water and flooding. We know that planting trees in the upper catchment reduces flood levels and velocities. There's science, decades of science to prove this. And it stops silt going into the river, creates habitat, creates shade, captures carbon. There's nothing wrong with planting trees. In fact, I'd like to see a huge movement and massive job and infrastructure investment in tree planting in this area. I think it's ongoing job creation, and it has so many benefits. So we just got to convince people.
Thanks, Vanessa. Now, Jose, you mentioned before about the Wanganui River and the case in New Zealand of the personhood the legal personhood of a waterway. Is that something that you've seen in your own home in Colombia? Have you seen similar things to this happening in that space?
Yeah, in 2008, Ecuador was the first country to enshrine the rights of nature in their constitution. Bolivia followed soon afterwards, and then there has been this sort of a cascade of different legal cases that make the point of granting rivers and other waterways rights. When we say legal personhood, we fall in the trap of thinking about the human as the center of everything. So some thinkers have started to use the word or the term riverhood so as not to talk about legal personhood of the river, but rather riverhood, which means that they have rights and they can enforce them in court. In New Zealand, as far as I understand, there will be a representative of the Crown and one from the community, so as to have, a say from those who have cared for the river and have their livelihood from it. So, in Colombia, there have been several cases. My wife is a lawyer, a cultural lawyer, but she's gone into environmental law in the last years. Is precisely, investigating that subject in Colombia. Let's say that what we can do here in the Biennale is try to give a voice to those issues, hoping that it will create a wider awareness of what we are dealing with. Of course, if the rivers are gone, we are all gone as well. So this is a question of survival as a species. So yes, in Colombia there are several, including Magdalena, the Paramo, like an important mountain, and the Amazon, the part of Colombia, the part of the Amazon that is part of Colombia. As you know, the Amazon runs through many countries, which also begs the question: what if you protect the Amazon, the little bit that you have in Colombia, and then the part that is in Ecuador, Peru, and then the rest, which is mainly in Brazil, is not protected? How is that,
Well, I was thinking about that in terms of the river is moving, and the river doesn't just stay in one place, it moves through so many different landscapes, and how do you protect all of the river in these cases?
Right, so the ways in which the rivers and waterways will be represented in the Biennale, besides those artists that are working with rivers and are doing works in relation to the rivers, are very different. So, for example, a collective of lawyers and artists from Ecuador and Italy called Art for the Commons, that are closely linked to the Tribunal of Nature, are thinking of creating a score based on GPS readings of the principal rivers that have legal rights throughout the world, and then that score will be played by the Orchestra of Native Instruments in Ecuador, which is an initiative that has many, many years. So they will create this performance for the Biennale. Other possibility would entail, for example, having one of the oldest webcams that is fixed on a particular waterhole in Africa, and then have the live feed of that particular waterhole throughout in real time throughout the duration of the Biennale, letting just whatever happens there be communicated to the public. So we are just in the very first phases of trying to think how would the bodies of water be represented in the Biennale.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to get to Sydney to come to the Biennale. I was thinking too, Vanessa, that last year you worked to save a significant tree in Nimbin. And do you think that trees, like the rivers, should have the rights of the rivers, the rights of legal personhood, to be cared for in that way?
Yeah, it's very sad to think that there's just one tree left on a subdivision and we're fighting for that tree. I think we need to take a landscape view and fight for whole lots of all trees and corridors of trees through our landscape. And I love the idea of a riverhood. And treehood, or trees along the river. And coming back to what José was saying earlier about rivalry and just the way we treat our river. We put concrete walls up and push water this way and build channels and force it that way. And we just look through our urban area and all the concrete drains, and they're designed to move water as quickly as possible through the landscape, when we know now we need to slow it, capture it, let it meander, so it's not forcing its way through and doing the damage that it does. So we've got a long way to go in terms of respecting water and the way it moves through our landscape. I love the idea of trees, but not single trees. That's just too sad.
One of the bases of the current legislation regarding rights of nature comes from a landmark case in the 70s. A lawyer that said, should trees have legal standing? So if corporations, which are not humans, can have a legal standing, why not other non-human beings? And that's at the core of the legislation regarding rights of nature.
Makes me think a bit about the Lorax by Dr. Seuss. He speaks for the trees because the trees cannot talk, but that should be part of our job, isn't it, to care for those natural beings almost. Which brings me back to you two here, and to say that I think this really also connects with connecting with country and the importance of the significance of that as well.
I think I've picked up 4 little pointers since with the discussion. I haven't in the paper. But Vanessa mentioned about the trees and that. Well, Alex is over there. When did we start the Bundjalung land care?
There's a question
There's 2010? And it was bare, nothing there. Now we've got this tall forest, rainforest, and it's based on all trees that were representative of being here before. And people are starting to see little critters come back in, birds, butterflies. It's between Bridge Street as you go towards Rich River High School, and you can shortcut through to the Lismore Showground. So that has just grown and grown. I've been down for a walk not very long ago. Lismore City Council granted us the land there, and then later on we got grant money to do things, and so it was all put back in and it's built a beautiful place there. Government in 1930s, the early 30s, gave every school in New South Wales I had it there in my mind a minute ago, camphor laurel tree to grow in their playground. And they became big and beautiful and shady, and they destroy everything that's under them. So if you look at our hill up here, after it was barren to nothing, you'll find it's full up with camphor laurel. There is one tree up there, the carry tree, which she stands out beautifully, and I hope what's the name. The last burial tree was in the school front yard at Modenville. And after the referendum, which gave Aboriginal people the right to vote, not the right to become citizens, but the right to vote, it was sort of hell for slather, and a lot of people feared things were going to happen, and Aboriginal people were going to come in and take your land, and all sorts of things with land rights and that. And so a lot of things were done quickly, undercover. Let's chop that tree down, and before you knew it was chopped down, and other significant sites around. Come around that time when the Italian club, I think it's about 68 years now, might be about 58 years old now, they came over. Now our sandy point, where the river was, where we went to swim, and it was a beautiful sandy point. The older girls went down there with bikinis on and sunbathed and, you know, caught your first love and all sort of things. You know, you didn't have to go to the beach. When they came, they put up the fences, we were denied access to go down there. But it was at the time in 68 when things were changing in Australia. So after 67 referendum in Australia, the government policy, what's the name, there was so many big changes, and it wasn't for the benefit of the Aboriginal people. It really was back for the benefit of the non-Aboriginal people who managed to achieve a lot more freedom, what have you. When you talk about water rights, Aboriginal people don't have water rights in Australia. We can go through the policy and you can show me there's a 1% and there's this, that and here, but when it comes down to actual action, and we could invite Rouse if you like, you can find out that Aboriginal people don't have water right. Down at Yamba and Gary, they were given sea rights, but not many young people go fishing to be able to have the benefit of that. When we are coming now to, and that's going to be another big phase in Aboriginal history, when land claims starting, they don't realise that, and we're in Lismore here's in the process, so people are going to start being nervous again. They don't realise that at this time, that when we get the land rights, or what do you call it, native title rights, we do not have any rights. The right is, there's that spot there which nobody lives in, but mind you, you can't get to it because all these farms own all these land around here and you can't get across the paddock to where that is. So you'll never get access to it. There's other places, Lismore City Hall, that's on Crown land, maybe, thinking there. We'll never get the right to that. We're lucky if we get the right to it. But we do have a good agreement with Lismore City Council that a lot of activities and cultural events do happen down there. And the partnership that's been there with them has been wonderful over the time. And we've got Rhoda that comes in, we've got Kirk that comes in. So we've got a lot of artistic people who have developed that into a nice place where we can all come and share. But under the native title rights, we will not be able to grow any commercial crops, fish commercially, build houses. We will not be able to do any of these things, and yet the government's going to make a big fuss that we've given you the land back. But none of these rights we'll have. We won't have any of those rights. So wait till, I don't know, whatever's going to happen in the future and that. And I think until that balance comes back again. But even like our river, the water rights down our river, I don't think you're allowed to put a speedboat on Richmond River here now, or Wilson River. And the recreational side of it, whereas you'd go for a swim and you could, you know, park up on the beach there and have a bit on the side of the banks. The river used to be narrow and deep. Now it is very wide, and if you jump off the bridge into it, you probably hit your head on the, or stand in the soil underneath the sandiness and that. So things are changing, but what are they changing for? You know, are they changing for the better for the land, for the better for the people, or for the better of money? And I think we need to be aware of all these things because it's important, because it's a, you know, if we don't have, you said, if we don't have water, what are we going to do? We won't be able to make lemonade, we won't be able to make beer or anything else. So that'll be a dry drought again.
It's interesting, in that conversation, it did make me think about the Te Awa Tupoa, which is from the Wanganui River case, and what they said. I'm not going to say it in Maori because I can't speak Maori very well, or at all. It's translates as I am the river is me. And I think that that's kind of what all of you have been talking about, that the river sustains us, the water is, we are mostly water, and we continue to damage the waterways and the ecosystem, then actually we damage ourselves as well. So I thought perhaps we could end with everybody talking about an experience of the river that they have that is a beautiful memory of the river, or a connection to the river.
Well, I've got lots of experiences along many rivers, but probably my most fondest memory is fishing with family in the rivers out Tennefield. The Mole River is actually where my father used to live, and there was a dam there, but we fished in many spots. My mother's here actually listening to the story at the front, and Pop, Peter as well, but I wasn't really interested in the fishing part, being young, but there would, be a few carloads that would go, and we'd go of an evening or in the day and stay late at night, as kids would play and laugh and, kind of giggle and get told to be quiet while our aunties and uncles fished, and we listened to their stories. So I've got, quite fond memories, and I find the more I'm getting older, the more I yearn to fish. I didn't do it then, but I'm kind of yearning for it now, and yearning for that time near the water, and wanting my kids to experience that as well. Yeah.
Auntie Thelma, do you have a memory?
Oh, look, I just was remembering the other day about when Granny Gordon, Ethel Gordon was alive. We'd go up to Bundjalung and get on the Mrs. McAlpin's and go over to Bundjalung. And one year there we went down for a biggest turtle dive, hunted, got the turtles and that. And the whole community, so it was a really big, and like you say, we'd go down to Yamba, and all the people from Yamba Casino would all go down there on the same day, Evans Head, at different times of the year on the same day. So it was a social gathering, and it was a place where we all connected and reconnected with our cousins and families, and knew, and that's the thing about the Bundjalung Nation, everybody knew which part you came from. It's I can remember from one going down to Cabot Street, and they didn't have a little bridge then, and young Paulo used to drive the little dinghy across. It was a little boat thing that had no motor, just the oars, and the water was just there. You was thinking, I'm going to fall in a minute, and it was only like a hop, skip and a jump across to the island. So yeah, that socialness, that transport of getting from one place to another and enjoying the journey.
The special thing for me, I think, is the ongoing connection with the river. So when I met the river here and met my family, like my land care group, which is my family, and we spent 20 years almost every weekend down on the riverbanks with our kids, getting our hands dirty, planting trees. And so it gave me a real sense of belonging to this community, gave me a role in this community, and a real passion for something to do. So planting trees shows positive action and hope for the future. And I think that's really, really important. So that's what it's given me, just that sense of belonging.
So I have many stories linked to the river, but I want to share a story from someone else. We disclosed a first list of 59 participants. So we have been meeting with them over Zoom or in person whenever possible for the last month. And they have been sharing their ideas for the projects that they want to do. A biennial, just for its sheer, size and visibility, prompts artists and to think of projects that are a little more ambitious than normal. So I'm really excited to see what Casino Wake Up Time will come up with. A challenge to what you ordinarily do, and maybe move into another direction or try something that you've been thinking of for a long time. but we were meeting with an artist, a very, very well-known artist, whose name I won't say. And she was saying, well, you know, because of COVID, I had to leave New York and then go to live in upstate New York near a river. And it's been raining like crazy. It had been raining like crazy. And then the river grew and trees fell. And then there was a natural dam and we had to do something about it. So we called a lumberjack to come and cut the trees. And then I married that man. So she said, well, I can not be more grateful to the river for what is happening with my life right now. And she was very happy in sort of how to channel this new found energy into the pieces that she's going to contribute to the Biennale.
That's a beautiful story also to finish on, because of rivers and thinking of the river as a lover that we all share. So thank you all for sharing your stories tonight. It was so wonderful to have you here, all of you, and to have all the elders here and the Wake Up Time women as well. So thank you very much.